This program features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Djuma Private Game Reserve. We're here. We're looking at the beautiful of a jackalberry in this cloudy day of the day. So it's pretty cloudy today. Just looking at the rising, you can able to see exactly that is not actually it's going to be sunrise that we can see about, but jackalberries there. So everybody jump aboard to your very own live safari through the African bush. Good morning, everybody again. Welcome to Djuma Private Game Reserve here in Sabi Lawfield. Of course, we're looking at the beautiful tree here, ebony or jackalberry tree. It's one of the trees that is evergreen around here during this time of year. And that's why you can still see a lot of the leaves dark that take place in that tree. But many of the trees have shared their leaves. So my name is Andrew this morning, and then I have BK on camera. It's actually a pretty cloudy day this morning. So, but we would maneuver around this. We've been actually doing quite a lot of these, driving through cloud of a evening or through cloud of a morning. So we know how to work on this. You can see how we're looking in the east. We're looking in the east. You can see how it's actually the cloud is taking on already. Not a heavy cloud, but it's actually so lucky that it's not actually mist. We can still see around us. So everybody, we're recording this live to you. So we would love to hear from you, sending these comments and questions. You can hashtag WildEarth on Twitter as well as at FC. That's on YouTube. But if you are under the age of 18, you can also send us the question, but you can use kids' questions at WildEarth.tv. But it's simple if you go register on WildEarth website and you head over to a live page and you can submit your question there. So that will be my plan of the day. I'm going to be searching. I know it was a herd of buffalo around, but we're going to be just take it easy look. What we're going to find, if it happens, lions were behind them, no problem, we will find out. But the herd looks like they have moved north. So we're going to check for anything we're going to find for everybody this morning. And then Chris also is up and mobile, which is also going to be looking around for anything for everybody, as well as JP in Pride Land. So you'll be then doing walk for everyone. See if we can able to make these come through. I believe it's everywhere actually cloud also. Pride Lands up north, maybe the same. So I'll start driving around, see if I can find anything around here. This buffalo, we came exactly where we left them yesterday, lying flat around here, but they have moved. So is that they decided not to sleep around here. And another watering hole, it would be Bevelsoek Dam. That's going to be another watering hole for them to visit. So everybody, I'm going to continue drive. In the meantime, let's quickly take a look at the weather on our various locations.
Good morning. Another cloudy morning, yet slightly warmer than the last couple of days. And we're just moving through a little dense area in mornings like this. If you focus on the slightly denser areas where animals hide from the slightly cooler weather, could often yield results. My name is Chris, and you'll be joining me today for another live safari. With me on camera ops, we have Darren today, and our plan is to just see what the bush is going to offer us today. We will try and find whatever comes up, and if there's any requests, please send them through in your comments. And we will try our best to facilitate where possible. Bearing in mind the bush is a dynamic scenario where, like I mentioned, we're just going to see what the bush provides for us today. Well, without further ado, we're going to be slowly moving forward, continue along this drainage, and hopefully be able to get a lead on anything. You can clearly see that there's quite a lot of movement around this drainage. The grass has been flattened somewhat, so it suggests that there is quite a bit of hoofed animal movement around, which in turn could attract predators. And one has to especially look under the trees at the moment. Little thickets, that's where quite a number of species would be hiding. Always important to look up into the trees as well. Often if something like a leopard manage to catch something through the night, they often take their prey up into a tree. Well, while we are searching, we're going to be going over to Pridelands with JP.
Good morning and welcome to WildEarth. We're live at Eco Training Pridelands and about to start our walk from Impala Plains. My plan for this morning is to start searching for some plains game species and eventually make our way to one of the local dams to see what we can go and find over there. So my name is JP LaRue, and behind the camera we've got Gerrit. For the moment it's still incredibly quiet. The morning is starting nice and cool, which makes it perfect for walking. And it's approximately some 14 degrees Celsius on the ground at the moment. That's considerably warmer compared to a month and a half ago when we had freezing cold mornings, and spring is on its way. And there's about just another 4 or 5 days before we get there. We're just going to take a few minutes and sit and listen over here to see what we can hear. Earlier on we heard one of the lionesses that moves on her own through this area. Some of you actually might know her as Lagafur. We're hoping that she's going to start contact calling again and that we can possibly locate on her. I find her a pretty amazing lioness. She was kicked out of a pride as a very young cub when the mother went missing, and she's been able to survive on her own. It also makes me think of a wild dog that I found a few years ago, which was a single female, but for a period of 2.5 years that I noticed her in the area where I guided, managed to support herself in hunting and taking care of herself. Eventually, this wild dog managed to get into another pack. Hopefully for Lagerfer, she will start off her own family very soon. Faint hyena calls in the distance. Quite often we have a number of different hyena calls that we hear. And quite often we also hear that long distance contact call, which is an aid of calling one another when there's a potential carcass or something that they would like to take over from lions. It's particularly interesting. They do need a considerable amount of group work when it does come to taking over a carcass from a lion. When it comes to lionesses, there's generally a 4-to-1 ratio of hyenas to lionesses to be able to take over that carcass. Well, we're going to stand around here a little bit longer, keep on listening, and in the meanwhile, let's go and see what the others are up to.
So we are still on a bumble, but firstly we are checking the eastern cut line, and then we're gonna finally check Bebesuk Dam, that area. It's been a long night. Animals, they may have done quite a lot of movement. And then it was not actually wind. Even now, still no wind, so it's perfect day for all animals. The prey species, they're all gonna love it. Such a weather like this, it's not cold that much, and then it's not windy. It's just sort of that cloud. May actually not be very much interested in drinking water, but those that would be thirsty, those that haven't maybe taken a last sip before dark, maybe yesterday, and then they're probably going to be drinking and they head off to the bush again. So we've been driving and listening to all the bird sounds, but it also is to understand what the bush is about. Because many of these birds, they may alarm call. Some of them, they were just going to call for keeping up in the same group always. But it's about the same with also animals. They may do the same for the same benefit.
We are now just out of the drainage system. We're approaching one of our waterholes. It's still a bit early for waterholes. It's just the route that we naturally took us to this particular area. The relevance of a waterhole at the moment is not necessarily to see animals, but it's a good point to start from in order to find any fresh tracks if there's anything specific that you are going to be looking for. So, and that's exactly what we'll do just now. And we basically then will hopefully be able to find tracks to track. If not, we will just continue. And today I just want to have you just experience some of the lesser known aspects of the bush. Just the mere scenery alone is an experience in its own. Good morning, Maxine. In the last day or two, I've seen snake tracks or slithers. suggesting that yes, they are starting to become active, especially on the warmer days. They might just bask in the sun. The evenings are still very, very cool, and snakes, being cold-blooded, probably won't move around that much, but they are starting to become active. I have not yet seen one, but we have definitely seen evidence of them moving around in the form of tracks. It's just such a lovely feeling, just listening to the birds waking up, announcing that they're also up and about, just re-establishing that rapport with others within the species, that this is my little territory, this is where I woke up, and I will be out and about soon to go and feed. And Shreya, we all hoping for some spotty cats all the time. So surely when or if we do find any tracks, we will definitely be giving it a good go to attempt to find it. We've been very fortunate this last couple of days with leopard sightings. There are times when they do tend to disappear. I'm just listening out, not only for enjoyment, but also there's purpose to it. Often remaining stationary like this, you could hear potential alarm calls of birds or monkeys, sometimes a lion roaring in the distance. You might hear branches breaking, suggesting there's elephants. You could hear that low hum of a bird of buffalo moving past in the distance. So there's also a bit of enjoyment involved, but it's definitely strategic as well. Good morning, Corin. That is a great question. The answer is no. There are no bears native to Africa. There are fossil records suggesting that a very, very long time ago there might have been bears, but in modern day Africa there are no bears whatsoever. But we do have lions. In fact, that whole family of carnivores called the Ursidae is not represented in Africa at all. I'm just going to take another 5 minutes to soak up this view and then continue to look for what the bush provides today. And in the meantime, we will be going over to Andrew on his bumble.
Chris, good luck. So myself, I've been driving around here. I already done a few roads, but on a look, but also listening to all of the sound of birds, which now we're about to arrive here at the Babusuk Dam also. We're going to stop, see what is around the dam. Where I've been driving, I was driving parallel with this drainage line system, so it was hardly for me to see the landscape, but it is beautiful. We saw that back there, even though with all those clouds that are taking place. hippos. I have a hippos in this watering hole from this point. I think this is only closest we can get to this hippo there. I know at some point we're going to have to go to that dam wall, but then they're going to be far away from us. So we've been seeing hippos quite a lot in Chitwa Dam, but these Bevilshoek Dam also have sometimes one male that stays here, but 2-3 of them now, so perhaps there's a visitor that he has. Maybe last night, I'm not sure, I haven't been here. Yesterday I didn't drive this area. There's quite a few of them, maybe 4 around here, so he has a visitor. That male that we actually keep seeing him here alone. And they've been out the whole night. It's the only time they return back to the water is before the sunrise. So anything 3-4 o'clock in the morning, they started to make their way back to the watering hole. There are nocturnal animals, and these nocturnal animals in a different way of how you would difference them or make a difference between animal that they may be interested to even get up and move during the day, even those are nocturnal. So those are maybe drove by maybe the special needs of a food, but also territory patrol. But with the hippos, for them to be safe, it's a watering hole. They have to be in the water. So comment from Critter Freak, you saying it's great to see some hippos, especially in this Bevilshoek Dam. It's so very good to see the hippos. And now during the wet season, this is where you see maybe 6 upwards from there. And there's another big dam up in the north, that's the Kayamanzi, well known of a lot of hippos. But these have been hanging around quite a lot, and this dam also, as well as a twin dam. So this is where they've been spending a lot of time in it, so they can switch between those. What a great sound that we just heard back there. So, but this is all about communication. So animal, they make sound to communicate, but they also make sound to warn the other or warn each other. And it's quite a lot of a watering hole, so When we listen now, we can actually get an audio way distances of another hippos probably responding to these calls that they can hear from these one. So I'm going to reposition maybe to the dam wall, see if maybe we can see some water birds around this watering hole.
As we celebrate Women's Month in South Africa, we acknowledge and thank those women committed to conservation, working tirelessly both on the front lines and behind the scenes. The Endangered Wildlife Trust is proud of the women who dedicate their lives to fighting to save species, conserve habitats, and benefit people. Here's to strong women everywhere who are dedicated to protecting forever together.
And I turned to Shaw and I saw that she had this panicked look on her face. Either she was afraid that something had happened or she was afraid that she was going to miss out on something. But instead of her missing out on those lions, we drove up next to them and I switched off the car so that she could hear what was going on. Now, these lions had killed a kudu, and she could hear these two cubs, both 8 months old at the time, busy pushing and shoving each other out the way to get to the best parts of the meat. And the mom was lying just to the side in the shade. Now, I'd known that before losing her sight, Sean probably knew what a lion looked like. But I really wanted her to know what this lion looked like. So for the first time in my guiding career, I started to describe to someone what a lion looked like. And I found that, I started to notice things in that lion that I'd never seen before.
Something very, very interesting. I didn't plan this, but this is a scene rarely seen. This is what we call a journey of giraffe. So beautiful.
Tune into WildEarth every single day. It's in your nature.
Delivering 6 hours of HD wildlife content live every day is no small feat. It's a massive team effort and we all rely on one another. Cam ops have a bit of work to do in the morning, up nice and early, get all the checks out of the way and make sure we're ready to go live. Helping others fall in love with nature brings meaning to what I do. It's also a lot of fun.
Welcome back to Bushwalk. We're out and about and to see what we can go and find. So this morning when we drove to our first place where we wanted to start our walk, we saw some scrub hares, and they tend to be in the open at night time and then retreat as soon as it becomes light. So generally the only signs that we do have of them in the daytime is their tracks as well as their little fecal pellets that they leave behind. It's probably one of the most tricky of all tracks to try and identify. But if you understand that they make an L or a 7 shape pattern, it becomes very easy to actually understand what you're looking at. So over the years, in tracking assessments, they often will remove most of these tracks and only circle a single track for you during the assessment. It's probably one of the tracks that has cost me most of my assessments to gain full marks. I can remember one year I came back from an assessment and my tracker asked me, what did you get wrong? And I said, scrub hare. So the next few weeks, he took me over and over and over to go and show me scrub hare tracks. And then he would call me, hey, JP, what is this? This is, and I will go, scrub hare. I says, no, that is what cost you your assessment. So something else that this often gets confused with is that of jackal tracks. This is another little extra little evidence for the scrub hare. This nice little pellet over here, pale in color. For those of you who has joined us for the first time, these pellets are generally produced in 2 different periods of the day. One is called night feces and the other one is called day feces. For night feces, it's randomly defecated at any given point, and this would be night feces. If it was day feces, it would have been covered with a glutinous-like layer, and we don't often find those pellets. The day feces pellets is the ones that hares will actually re-eat. It's very loosely packed as well, and the reason why they re-eat it is because they need to obtain those nutrients as well as B vitamins, which they didn't ingest on the first ingestion. I often use these little pellets as well very effectively to determine wind direction when I do want to approach a dangerous game species. Quite a few times I've noticed trackers will often kick the ground. However, this is not a great thing to do. Animals have very good hearing, and when you kick the ground to put dust into the air and to see the wind direction, the animal actually hears you and then starts moving off. I quite like scrub hares. They're quite interesting animals to watch. They can often run at very big speeds, fast speeds, sometimes covering up as fast as 70 kilometers per hour in front of vehicles. So therefore, we always put our lights off if we see them in the front of a road so that they can move off. Otherwise, they will stick to the road. Let's go and see what the others are up to. We're going to continue our walk and go and see what we can find.
Thanks, JP. So we're still sitting here at the beautiful of Bevelisuk Dam, and then these hippos are also still doing a little bit of a movement around in this watering hole. But since they have returned from their grazing land, and they would spend a lot of time here with a cloudy day like this, when they want, if it's safe for them to come out, they may come out, but they won't wander far from the water. So hippo, they're one of the Hannigat fermenter. They don't chew cud for sure. So hippo are selective grazer with preference for short grass. That's where when they move out of this waterhole, they may maybe sometimes move far in search for green grass. Unfortunately, this time of the year, it's no such green, but they have already made their own grazing land. Wherever they go, they visit those around the mounds, termite mounds. They graze around these termite mounds. So in that way, digestion system that they still have 3-chamber stomach. It's very interesting that, but they don't chew cud. So everything that they eat, it's a long process of this fermentation to take place. But eventually it works out with all the bacteria help in their tummy. Metrio, Wenabi. So you're asking what happened to the hippo during a severe drought. So they're one of the animals, they have a problem when it comes to that situation. They need water. Then some of them, they will reach water when they can, but they have to move far to search for water. And then eventually, if there's no watering hole around here, it's a result in die. They just die. Many of the hippo we lost, the drought that we actually had back there, and then some of them they were captured up north by the conservationists, but not all of them. And that time we saw a number of hippo drop roughly down, and then of course it's been picked up since then. We've seen so many of the hippos, different group. It was only one watering hole when you searched for hippo you would find, and the rest of these watering holes they were without hippos. Until then the number balanced. It takes actually a few years for that to balance the number. So during a drought, they actually face a challenge. Not only grass, but for their skin. They cannot stay long outside of the water without being into water. Why, you're asking will the hippo give birth in the water? They may, but they would also give birth on the bank of the water. So the reason they have to give birth on the bank of the water is that the babe need to start to wobble around, and of course still need to breathe normally. And that way they have to be either on the bank or not far from the water when they do that. So eventually when the baby drop, it would take maybe a few hours before it gets used to how the water works and things like that. So they need to learn all of that. So the mother, she will make sure she stays in a shell of water that is not very deep at all. Of course, they actually need a lot of grasses. Per night, it will consume roughly over 60 kg per night. But also depending on the amount or availability of food that is around here, because they would need only grass. They won't browse, and that's why wherever they are, it's got to be plenty of grasses. Look at this one, trying to actually balance on top of the mother there. A lot of time they would do that when the mother went too much into the very deep, and this baby, they can still float, but then eventually they would need to get on top of their mother so that they can take it easy when they want to rest for a couple of hours there. Karen, you're asking what the hippo making this grunting noises using their mouth or their nostrils. So a lot of time they would actually use their nostrils to actually make that such sound. So the mouth is always in the bottom or in the water. So the nostrils that it would always stick out and still make this sound. But it goes through vocal boxes until they come out like that. So everybody seems to be, we've been waiting here to see if there is no, but we will be searching around here for water birds, to see what we're going to see around this watering hole.
Welcome back on Bushwalk. We've been out and about for an hour or so and seeing what we can find. One of the interesting tracks that we actually found is that of an antlion larvae. And here we can follow this little squiggly lines that almost looks like a toddler's writing or drawing attempt. And it's just amazing that a little insect that is less than a centimeter in length can travel such a big distance. And what he's doing is relocating to a more secure little site where he hopefully can catch an ant. And here we go, and there's his little conical pit, which most of you know. I'm not going to disturb him, but I'm trying to dig him out. But quite often what these little antlions will now do is position themselves to where the ants can fall in. And what happens if an ant falls into the pit, they'll start flicking sand onto the ant so that it can slide back. They then use these two stabbing mouth parts to stab into the ant and then basically extract all the fluids from the ant, discarding the empty exoskeleton, which consists of chitin, which is basically undigestible and an incredibly hard outer layer of which insects' bodies consist of mostly. So for those of you that aren't familiar with antlion larvae, they eventually emerge as adults that look something similar to a dragonfly. The adults are also very short-lived, however the larval stages can be quite long-lived. One of the interesting things is that antlions are also scentless. And the reason why they are scentless is because that the ants have a phenomenal ability of detecting different smells, and therefore they also don't produce any waste material in terms of fecal pellets. They only will produce waste and get rid of the waste once that they shed their skin and they enter the next stage of their life.
We have continued on our journey, and as promised, we will take what the bush gives us today. And no, it is not the drongo that we found. We managed to get a small family group of elephants. Looks like a mom, young daughter, and the latest calf. So this is a literally small family, but is certainly part of a larger group, which is just currently not with their herd, which is not a problem. They can, in fact, communicate with them, even over a long distance. And I know that baby elephants are a firm favorite for me as well. They seem to like this burnt section here where we've burned a fire break. And a topic we will probably discuss a little later, but they seem fixed on this particular bush willows that's on the burnt area, and some of the burnt grasses, and obviously some regrowth that's coming out that they're eating as well at the moment. But this young elephant still needs to learn. There's so much for him to learn. What to eat, what not to eat, which plants could be medicine, where water holes are situated. And it's a lifetime of learning. It's very similar to us going to school. Nature is so amazing, and Lynn also commented on that, and yes, I totally agree. It's fascinating, and there's no words to fully describe how amazing it is. I don't think we do have any word in the English language to fully do justice to how amazing Africa is, and nature in general. I'll ask you to stay put and hold on. We will just move a touch forward to just see if we can get another visual of them. They've just disappeared. They might just emerge from the trees anyway. There we go. No need to reposition. I always aim not to move around in elephant sightings if I don't need to. Good morning, Barbara. Unfortunately not. That was the only footage that we had. How amazing was that? How this elephant charged Darkman and he eventually jumped on her. There don't seem to be any evidence that I am aware of that there are serious injuries. Even a young elephant like that would have quite a thick skin, and it would take quite a bit of punishment for a lion, even the size of Darkman, to bring it down, and certainly there would have been other elephants around. So I'm not entirely sure what's happened to it. It would be interesting to see if we could locate that herd a little later. It would be difficult to say which herd. There's so many different herds currently at Djuma that came from virtually all around us, but we will certainly be keeping an eye out to see if there's any injuries. Purely for academic reasons, there's nothing we will really do, as this is just part of nature. But that was incredible, wasn't it? Big discussion point this morning amongst us all back at camp. Well, they slowly moving back into the woodlands, and we want to leave them exactly the way we found them in total peace and let them do their thing. We are essentially on their ground, and we want to impact as little as possible. And therefore, we'll be slowly moving on and see what's up next. Coming back to this fire, it's just a little fire break that has been burnt in order to prevent runaway fires later in the season. And fire is something that is natural and necessary in the grassland and savannas in Africa. In a nutshell, it gets rid of dead grass material and stimulates new growth. That is the easy version of it. There is another 10-20 minute version of that, which is quite technical, which I'm not going to necessarily go into now. Fire stimulates new growth and gets rid of unwanted dead material. But runaway fires in certain times could cause severe damage and even destroy everything, including the trees that are vital. And therefore we do these fire breaks just to prevent runaway fires. So far, not a lot of tracks. Should we take this road? It's always amazing how you just get this feeling around, I need to take this road. And many times it's my gut feeling we're right, and quite a lot of times not. So let's continue on this chosen path and see what Andrew is up to.
So we're sitting here looking at this beautiful Acacia nigracis. It's one of the species of the tree out here, where every time when the winter's about to finish, you only see, looking at this tree, first you see the sign from this tree flowering about. I know yesterday we saw some of the larger fruited bush willow that it was also on the burn sections. But this one, they're also one of the first trees to show a little bit of the flower. Eventually, it will be a leaves that will be actually growing, greening around here. This tree, they're the one to have a green before the rain. And then many of the other trees, they would definitely need some moisture from the ground, which is when the ground's wet. But many of them, they would only by the temperature change, humid, that take place during the day. In the afternoon, that's where the growth begin. And the knobthorn trees is also favorite for a lot of giraffe around here. They go in and out in search for especially trees like this. So soon, this giraffe, they would be finding easy access to feed on these leaves. Of course, it's actually a hook thorns. But a giraffe, they have actually a special way of dealing with these thorns, and then they go through these little leaves, tiny leaves that are actually taking place from this tree. So not only this tree, but there's quite a lot of these, all that you see on the distances. These are still enough thorns that we can see in this area.
Calling all Wild Earth explorers, we have a new and frankly awesome travel prize for you to win. andBeyond Phinda Private Game Reserve encompasses an impressive 28,000 hectares of protected wildlife land in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. As you have seen on WildEarth, andBeyond Phinda showcases one of the continent's finest game viewing experiences and is well known for close-up sightings of the elegant yet elusive cheetah, as well as the rare black rhino. Sign up to be a Wild Earth explorer before the 16th of September, and you and a friend could be heading to the magnificent Phinda Mountain Lodge, where you will spend 3 nights escaping the real world at this ultimate safari location. Wild Earth explorers, it's in your nature.
We're here at the Advanced Rifle Handling Challenge, which is actually lots of challenges in one to gauge the contestants' skills at different distances and different speeds. This is probably the challenge that the contestants are the most nervous about. So let's get them locked and loaded. Competitors are now doing the Hales halt, where they have to run back and forth to a target, turn, take aim and shoot. And this simulates a chase in a real environment and gets the heart pumping and the blood pressure up. James gave us a demonstration, and the skill involved in this exercise is remarkable.
This is a battle of 2 great carnivores of the African wilderness. Whew. Whoa! You don't want to be under those jaws. Definitely, this round goes to the lion. Look at that. Fantastic.
Expect the unexpected here on Wild Earth daily.
Welcome back on Bushwalk. We're still looking at tracks, and we decided, seeing that it's incredibly quiet this morning, that we're going to hone our tracking skills a little bit. We also decided that we're going to share a few ways for you to make tracking a little bit easier. So if you are interested in tracking and how to learn to track, some of the most basic things that you would like to learn is to put tracks in different categories. And we generally put them in 3 basic groupings, which is firstly a plantigrade track, is where the animal will walk on its whole foot. The next one we refer to as a digitigrade track, where the animal will have little pads like a cat or a dog. And then for those animals that walk on their hooves is a 3rd category. And then you can start adding the different details. And sometimes the next important thing to do is just to step back and look at everything else what you can see in the area. I'm going to start off with a plantigrade track over here, which is probably one of the most primitive tracks of all the tracks out here. It's the same foot structure as what we have, and that's one that we have with a vervet monkey over here. Vervet monkey is a fairly easy track. It's much smaller than baboon, and what we also see is that it makes a sharp V-like shape at the back part of the pad over here. Unlike baboon, that tends to be much more rounded. It's got fairly short nails compared to the incredibly large nails of a baboon. We also sometimes find that they leave their tail dragging on the ground, which is one of the ways that we can also separate them from baboons. One of the defining characteristics of primates is that they've got an opposable thumb, and here we can see that little opposable thumb. Just like ours, it enables us to handle a wide range of different things and perform a different number of tasks. As we progress over here, there's one of our unguli-grade tracks, which belongs to the antelopes. This little antelope that's known as a steenbok, and quite often this track is confused with that of duiker. Duiker is much rounded, it appears much more heart-shaped compared to the straight outer edges of a steenbok, which you see over here. You can see how sharply it also tapers to the front of the track. I do like steenbok. We quite often follow this little one over here. He tends to walk quite big distances, and generally we consider them as a non-water dependent species. This one, however, does take big journeys towards the dam, goes and drinks there, and then walks all the way back on the road. If I remember, we tracked him over 3 kilometers the other day. It shows you even when they're hardy species, which is water independent, will also go and have a drink when there is surface water available. The same counts for duiker. They're also considered as a water independent species, and we actually often find them at the waterholes out here on Bridelands. So just to come back to this foot structure over here, as I mentioned earlier, it's referred to as a Nguli grade foot structure. This is a foot structure where the animal runs in the whole toe and enables it to run fast and get away from potential prey. Good morning, Megan, and welcome to the show. Yes, their tracks can tell us a lot about what's going on. I actually can determine more about looking at tracks, what's going on in my environment, than physically trying to follow what the animal is normally doing. These little things always have the ability to tell stories, and quite often we do take into account different sounds that we also hear in the environment, and we can make rough ideas about where we can find tracks, where animals are moving, what they were doing. Quite often we can even interpret what actions they were performing, either mating, fighting, hunting, and a number of other activities can be deducted from that. We also find that animals generally, especially territorial species, tend to operate on a fixed pattern, and then we start noticing that they will follow the same game paths, the same areas, demarcated the same middens, and that makes it sometimes easy for us to track. We're going to continue looking at tracks, and hopefully we'll be able to find something interesting this morning. And let's go and see what Andrew is up to.
Thanks so much, JP. Good luck. So we got a beautiful bird here, a lilac-breasted roller. So I know we always talk about bird being so beautiful due to their colors, their god. But when it comes to this bird that we have here, it's one of the magnificent colored bird. And now it's cloudy, cannot see the beauty because there's no sunshine through that bird, but it does have beautiful color. And it's out there, sitting there for a search for an insect that may be moving about in the ground or flying. That's why it's always looking on the ground. It's been in the buffaloes here. See, all the dungs are probably from yesterday. Sitting there watching. So any movement of insect, that bird will actually eventually fly right away to that insect and get it. Perhaps come to the very same spot or different spot. Oops, cleaning its beak. So there is a time sometimes where you find there are two of them, male and a female, but always sometimes isolated, just like that. And the good things about them, they're so beautiful and they don't migrate, so they are available all year round. Oops, gone to the ground. just flew off. So that was probably something to do with the hunting method. So when they fly down and they sit down, and then since there's been a lot of buffaloes here, some of the insect and some of those consumed, when they buffalo dung, they may be trying to eat those, but they also get eaten by birds. So that bird doesn't actually take a lot of seed, but they'll also feed on various insect. They're insect feeder bird. Alan, you're asking if I've ever seen cheetahs in this area. I've been heard of a sighting of cheetah. Actually out of reach. When I'm saying out of reach, is that so many of these boundaries between. And then, of course, it's actually been a while for me since I've seen a cheetah. But they're around, so sighting, it's been going. You know, they animal that would prefer more open than very of this drainage line system. So let's go across to JP and Prideland, see what they got.
Welcome back on Bushwalk. We just found the giraffe and we decided that we're going to sneak up to it and give you a little bit of a closer look. Let's see what she's getting up to. And the reason why I say a she, it looks like a female, as it's got a fairly thin neck and got those little black paint-like brushes on the tip of the ossicones. However, you can often make a mistake, as young males also have dark little tips to their ossicones. It's only when they become much older that they start showing up as a bald spot. So sometimes it's actually just best to check under the underbelly and see if there's no penile sheath. In this case, it's definitely a female, as there's no penile sheath. Just want to see something, sneak a little bit closer. There's something really, really strange about the backside of this animal. And it looks like there's some injury that has maybe taken place there. Also notice that there's no tail over there. But just below the tail, that there's some form of injury. I'm not sure what it is. I saw something like that many years ago in a rhino, and the vet explained it to us as a prolapsed anus. It doesn't seem to have affected her. There's also an oxpacker on the back of the tail, waiting for the tail to be lifted, but it can create some ticks. It's just amazing how hardy animals can be, where injuries that would be fatal to us is only a small little limiting factor for them for a short period of time, and they heal up very quickly. And back feeding again. Quite often we tend to find that females generally tend to feed much lower than males and tend to bow their heads down, while males generally will tend to feed in a much more upright position. However, I don't follow that as a hard, fast rule, as I've seen a number of different variations between both males and females. What I do find quite interesting is that they do form distinct patterns on the vegetation when they are feeding, and that's pretty much dependent on the size and height of that population in that area. They might sometimes find upside down triangles, or hour-shaped patterns which they browse onto trees. For those of you who have joined us for the first time, I find it also particularly interesting that females tend to be more selective about the quality of food that they feed compared to the males, that has got a little bit more of a junk food diet and will basically focus on feeding as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to get themselves full. And they would rather indulge in other activities such as fighting and looking for females. And the reason to come back to why that female needs to be always selective about what she eats is she wants to be in the best possible condition so that she can ovulate. I also find it particularly fascinating that they are a ruminant with the longest gestation period. They carry for some 457 days. The second longest gestation period for a ruminant, which is an animal with a four-chambered stomach and an even number of toes, belongs to a closer relative of a giraffe, which is known as a okapi, which we find in the forests of West Africa, and they carry for approximately 425 days. Some of you have also noticed that giraffes tend to be very quiet animals, and we see that they don't often vocalize. However, occasionally I have heard them creating a number of different calls. Their close cousin, the okapi, which we find in West Africa, tends to actually be more focused on vocalizations as a communication method, unlike the giraffe, who uses visual communication. And the reason is they occur in thick wooded forests, which makes it very difficult otherwise to use visual communication. For those of you that don't know how a okapi looks like, they're much more shorter-necked, and they look like a cross between a giraffe and a zebra, and they way more cryptically coloured, and the different bands of black and white, compared to the giraffe, which has got these dark blotches and square-shaped patterns.
So I'm on a mobile again, searching around. Been actually searching already down quite a lot of roads here, and the buffalo that we've seen yesterday, they perhaps have moved far away from us. I was hoping to see how they've been doing all night, but unfortunately they're probably not around in the area. So being behind their tracks, and they're always leading away north. But there is no line tracks that we've seen about behind these tracks. So is that perhaps they wanted to change a position to another in general? They must have actually done that through that darkness, is because it was not even a moon last night that it was available for them to be able to at least see it around. So I'm going to check the northern boundary here.
We have managed to find very fresh tracks of something. And in good sunlight, you would be able to see the definition of the track quite clearly. Now, I did mention this morning that we are going to just see what the bush provides. Now, however, what's happening here is one can see the vehicle tracks from yesterday's game drive. You see a little zigzag pattern there. And then right here, I've circled this just to point it out. But right over here, one can see a pad and 4 toes. That toe is not so clearly defined. And this appears to be a female leopard. Now this is relatively fresh. You can see a few little drops of water. It's just started drizzling now, so I'm not too worried about that. But it is on top of nocturnal creatures, the likes of certain birds and insects that we see during the night operating. And this is rather fresh. I would place it within the hour. So this could be a very good track to follow, which is exactly what we're going to attempt to do. Why we have came to the conclusion that this is a female, one would see, firstly, the size, and it's quite tricky to do that with camera work, but measuring the size, the males have much larger paws than the females. And then if we look at the pad, absence of claws, which suggests it's a cat, and then the back part of the pad itself got 3 very distinct lobes, which is characteristic of all true cats. Now, again, size-wise, females have smaller tracks than that of males. They're nearly half the size. But also that lobe on the side, one can see it's a bit more square, whereas with the males, it will have a very distinct, very round bulge. Just be careful, it might also be a young male, and often the rear paw also less pronounced. Now, here we have a rear paw. One can see that if you look at the width and the length of the track, the length is much longer than the actual width, and that would then be a rear paw. If one look at the front paw, much more rounded track, the width and the length are almost equal, and that would be a front paw. So what we are going to be doing is hopefully follow, and the tracks are on the road. It seems just like the animal is in transit to either an area where it wants to go and hunt, or it could potentially be an animal marking its territory. We're not sure which particular animal this might be, or individual. Hi Candace, lovely question. I always say that tracks and tracking is one of my strong points and points of interest. Now, tracks is essentially the newspaper. In the morning, I wake up and make myself a cup of coffee, and one of the first things I do is read the newspaper. It's to be informed what's happening in my country, what's happening in the world, and tracks is exactly that. It tells us what's happened during the night. It tells us what species are up and about. It can tell us how old the tracks is, how long ago the animal has been here. And it can tell us what direction the animal is moving. It potentially tells us what it was doing. It can even tell us if an animal is if the tracks is not in the normal sequence, as we call it. You can see if something's walking with, I mean, if you think about Darkmane, for instance, if you compare his tracking sequence with that of another male, it will be slightly different because of that injured paw. So you can extract countless information out of tracks. We can even use tracks in ecological surveys where we want to figure out what type of life, where you would need to do, let's say, a species audit or something like that, and tracks can give you an indication of certain species that occurs in your region without actually seeing the animals or whatever creatures they may be. And it is just incredibly stimulating trying to read tracks, and it is a skill that's, other than Africa, it seems to be disappearing. Now out here in our genre, there's people who live for tracking. We've got trackers working for safari lodges, and then we've got a core group of people here that keeps that alive and teaches the younger generation about tracking. And it's an art. It's a disappearing art, and it's rather sad. And therefore, one of my personal goals is to make, or create awareness. And I want to just highlight what Marilyn just commented on, that tracking is amazing. You know, I can spend days tracking a leopard or an elephant, sometimes even birds. You know, you can even track birds, certain birds. No, it's really a stimulating topic for me, and again, like I mentioned, it's something that I like to create awareness about. It just makes it real, sitting here, putting my hand right next to this track, knowing that less than about an hour ago, right here where I'm sitting, a leopard placed its paw right next to me. And that is a wonderful feeling. Well, we're going to continue on these tracks, and we're going to be sending you over to Andrew to see what he's doing.
Chris, good luck there following up on these tracks. Of course, you know, looking at the tracks, you got to examine them very well, and then of course you eventually came up with the truth with which one is which you're looking at. Tracks can be similar sometimes, especially cats, lions, leopards, where the only difference is that lions have a big paw and then leopards are small paws, but they're all cats. So their claws retractive, so they would drawn back when they're not in use, and they're only available when they're in use. So, and that's what it is. So we ourselves still having a look around here for anything we're going to come across. Bird of prey, vultures. That's what we're actually hoping to see, because these vultures sometimes is a way you can tell if there is any cats that are well hidden around here with a kill, perhaps. But there is also some birds where you look for general game, such as all of these kudus. You can always rely on them. This is when you see these oxpeckers flying across to always one directions, and you know they may be in that area, whether it's a warthog, whether it's buffaloes, but it's got to be any of the animal out there. So I'm going to carry on, but I'm going to be sending you everybody across to JP in Pride Lands.
Investigating the handiwork of an elephant, we had broke down a knob fawn to get to the higher branches. What we've also noticed is that there's also a number of interesting little fawn-like structures over here, which is little knobs, which gives the plant its name, the knob fawn. It's also covered with lichens. And what I find quite fascinating about these lichens is that they're actually two separate organisms, a fungus and an algae, which will work together for the benefit of one another. So generally, when we find these mutualistic relationships, they were born out of a parasitic relationship, and in return, one of the organisms also learned how to exploit the other, so that both could benefit, not just the one. So how this works is that the algae has got the ability to photosynthesize as it has chlorophyll. So by means of sunlight being provided with necessary nutrients, it can then convert that into a usable food form for the relationship. The fungus, on the other hand, has got the ability to extract nutrients and minerals from the dead plant material, which is the outer layer of the bark, and then provide it to the algae. It's also particularly interesting that these lichens are also indicators of air quality, And quite often what they use them for is to assess air quality by simply looking at which chemicals are found in them, as if they extract chemicals out of the atmosphere as well. And generally they have good indicators of clean air. And they're also one of the very few plant-like growth forms which actually occurs on the Antarctic. So unlike the lichen that lives off on the outer layer of a bark, we find that the elephant specifically targets the inner layer of a bark, which is where all the nutrients and minerals is. And this section is known as a cambium. It's also responsible for transportation of nutrients and minerals. And at this time of the year, when the tree starts flowering, this is where all the nutrients and minerals are transported up to the top of the plant from the roots, so that it can start producing a flower and eventually a leaf. And later on, those flowers will become seeds once they've been pollinated. You'll also notice that there's quite a lot of elephant damage throughout the area. Quite often this is considered as being harmful. However, it is not really a harmful relationship to the environment if there is a sufficient amount of elephants in the area. Once there's too many elephants in the area, then it can become detrimental. So what we also find is that it maintains a balance between grasses as well as trees. We also see that it increases the amount of grazing antelopes in the area as well as browsing animals if it's in the right balance. If the ecological carrying capacity of elephant is exceeded in the area, however, this can seriously degrade the area to a point that there's no more grasses, no more trees, and eventually erosion will set up in that area. And that can seriously change the whole composition of that environment.
RSA has a long history, over 90 years, of being involved and even pioneering aspects of the conservation sector in South Africa. Over that long history, we have realized that all of the issues that we are facing both locally and globally are due to human impact. Therefore, we need to concentrate on working with people, and that is what WESA does. What makes me passionate about the work that we do at WESA, and in particular the work that I engage in, is actually connecting with people. Currently the work that I'm working on is working with youth in a skills development program, and just to meet the youth and to hear their stories and to bring them opportunities that we hope will have some impact on their lives really fuels me to get up every morning. A huge shout out to the women that I work with, as well as to all the women that are contributing hugely within the environmental sector, both in South Africa and in the world.
We got there, he had probably moved a couple of 100 meters down the river and was about 10 meters from this causeway. So I radioed the lodge quickly and just asked them to bring a land cruiser around and some tow straps. So we thought we were going to try be heroes and save this giraffe. And now a big bull, probably over a ton, he's a big unit. I got the tow strap one side of the giraffe and managed to get it around him with the boat, and the other edge of the tow strap obviously back onto the bank. So we made this U around him because he was lying quite close to the bank. And we put that land cruiser in low range and we just gave it hell and pulled that giraffe, and the tow strap slipped up and we thought, oh no, it's going to slip off the top of the head, and it caught on his ossicones at the top. And that last 10 meters pulled him out onto the bank, and he battled. He was obviously quite weak and all that.
Looks like it's a very difficult climb because every time it tries to climb, the ground is breaking, so it slides down. But it's the only one. Look at that. That is the call of desperation with the cub. It's like, what are you doing, mommy? Oops. Oof.
Expect the unexpected here on WildEarth daily.
So from our point where we saw the leopard tracks, she moved into the block, and we've now circled around and that brought us to the main road here, and we're just driving slowly in order to see if the tracks emerge, and that will be our next step. Now, while we were on tracking and while I'm slowly driving and looking for tracks, on that point, just to explain a little bit more about, I'm not sure the science, but more if you want to structure the different types of tracking. So what we did back there was basic tracking. So you get basic tracking, that is when you've got a visible clear trail. Clear animal, leopard on the road, you can see the trail, you can literally walk at a pace and follow it. Then you get systemic tracking. That's now where the sequence of the tracks move into a slightly more difficult area, perhaps thick grass, bush, there's a lot of leaves. So there you have to start looking for every individual track and in a way anticipate where the next footprint will be. So you follow the sequence, and then you have intuitive tracking, and that is what we are doing now. Intuitive tracking is using your knowledge of the species. If it is an animal that you almost certainly know, like many of the leopards around, and you use your knowledge of the terrain in order to anticipate where the tracks will be. And this is often where you lose the trail, and you now need to get back onto the trail in order to locate the animal. Then you revert to intuitive tracking, and that's a skill that can only be developed over time spent in the bush. And having worked with a number of trackers in this industry, I have seen magicians, to say the least. And nearly all of them are almost forensic in the way they exercise their tracking skill. But at the moment, we will double back. This is the direction in which she was moving in. I do not see anything. However, the light is overcast, and that makes the conditions slightly more difficult. Because if you do have a bit of sunlight, it will illuminate the track, especially early morning and late afternoons. And what complicates it as well is that we are on a main road, so there is a bit of traffic at times, people moving to their place of work, one of the lodges in the area. But we should be able to see if it crosses. It's quite a wide road. Myself and Darren and a few other guides in the area will work this area and continue to look for this leopard. And we're going to be going over to Andrew in the meantime, who's also looking for animals.
So we are also searching around here for anything we can see. We actually haven't come across any of the tracks except for those elephants, which I will be looking for around here. So I have to come to quarantine pretty much. There we got a kudu there on the western side of this clearing, quarantine. So this is what we offer for now. Young male kudu. They're actually one of the interesting animals, kudu. It's amazing to see them. They come out of that bush. They're in a clearing at the moment. But a lot of time, I can promise you for sure, you always find them in a thicket because they mean to browse. That's what they get their meal from. They would have to stick in a bush for their feeding in the trees, pretty much. But perhaps some herbs in this open area where they get attracted here. So these buffalo herds, we were trying to find them there. It seems they have went far away, even crossed perhaps into Beverly Souk, that side. But, it's going to be a long day for them. It happens, they will return back to Djuma. For now, we're going to continue, search for perhaps elephants around in this area. If there's going to be any of these big mammals, even giraffe, sometimes we spend time with giraffe. Critter freak. So you're commenting saying that kudu, they're such a beautiful creatures. They are actually such a beautiful. So they were looking at the young male, just above a year, perhaps 2, with their horns sticking out like that. But they're only showing a little bit of the horn as a young male when they reach a year old. And when they're actually fully growing, this horn, they would have roughly 3 twists up. And they're still too young to be able to participate with the big male out there, which they eventually they would do that. They would move out of these mothers and then they would participate now on the whole bachelor male that are out there. Which you do find the bachelor males in the kudu as well. So they also make sound when they're threatened. They all bark like a dog almost when you hear them from the distance. You would think of somebody with a dog out there. And so the kudu would bark as well as a Ngala would bark. And then also bush bark. Those are the ones that can bark when they see a danger. The impalas, they more blow in their nostrils when they see dangers. The wildebeest as well, they blow their nostrils, but very strong when they hear it. So definitely this is all about the herbs. In that green net, these are all the surge that it's taking place into that. And they have such a big ears as well. And they rely pretty much on the hearing, sight, smell. But always with these vertical stripes. So we had a...
What's the difference between a kudu and an Ngala?
Lucy, you're asking what's the difference between a kudu and a Ngala. There is a difference. So kudu, they are always greyish in color, where a Ngala, there's also difference between the females and the male in the Ngala. And the female Ngala, they're always kind of like yellowish, where males dark, but also small in size. And Ngala, they tend to be very small in size compared to the kudu. So I'm going to take a look at everybody to lucid just to see the difference. I have just a picture here. So, sorry BK, yeah, so this is actually kudu. You can see the male, how different to the female. So females always pretty much yellow, but with a banded stripe. These are vertical stripe that are there with a kudu. They may also have it as a Ngala, but there's a difference in color with the female and the male. The kudu, male and female, then it's always the same in color. The difference is that the male, they go very thick in neck and also, very big long horn, spiral horns. That's what the difference is there. But we also find Ngala around here. So everybody, I'm going to carry on, search around here, perhaps for these elephants.
Welcome on Bushwalk. At the moment we're looking at an apple leaf tree, which is one of my favorite trees out here. So over the years, trees have also become one of my favorite subjects to study, especially the cultural, medicinal and the practical applications that those trees hold in the natural environment. And it doesn't always make sense for us who lives in a modern environment, but for the people that used to live out here, this was their lifeline in terms of a number of practical uses. So the tree that we are looking at, the roots itself also holds an interesting toxin, which is known as rotenone, and that has often been used for poisoning fish. Traditionally, that was used for a collection method so that you could eat the fish afterwards once it's been well cooked. However, these days, rotenone also gets used in conservation circles, especially when you've got a pan or a dam that's been affected with a large number of alien fish species, which outcompetes the indigenous fish species. The quickest way to get rid of them is to poison the water with rotenone, and then after a while restock it with indigenous fish species. We also find that the leaves have also been used in the past as an alternative for spinach in times of drought. So if you ever wondered where the tree gets its name from, apple leaf, it actually gets the name from the sound that the leaves make when they crunch the leaves in your hand. I'm just going to point the leaf out to you so we can also see that it's got 3 individual leaflets, and this is called a petiole right over here, and this is the point where the leaf starts. So we can always ask ourselves, is it a simple leaf, a complex leaf, and we can go for a variation of different themes to assist with identifying the leaf. But this is how it sounds when it's been crunched. Once again, hence the reason it's called the apple leaf. It's also referred to as a rain tree, as it's got an association with an insect which feeds on the leaf, and the excess moisture that this insect drops to the ground appears like a rain that's falling down to the ground.
So we just realized more of these kudu, they have paws come out of the bush into this clearing here. So we decide to give it another go here. But it's very interesting to see them going down like that, and especially that they have their favorite here over all of herbs that they're trying to pick up. Many a time you'll see kudu go down, their neck down. They wouldn't take grass pretty much, they don't like that, but they would actually pick up a lot of dry pods, dry leaf from the trees this time of year where it's winter. And they one of the antelope that can jump very well. Corinne, so you're asking have a writing season, so no, it's all pretty much all year round in some area, but also out here. So they truly 100% antelope, which they have a 4 teeth, which that suits the antelope to have. And then of course, the baby would be able to stay with the mother or drink until they're about 6 months. So interval between a baby and the next pregnancy, it's anything 11 to 12 months, but it's roughly on the antelope species, the biggest species of antelope. Such a beautiful antelope there. They just have a shape like a camel when you look at the little hump on there just before the neck there. And that's what allows them to jump. They can jump 3 up to 4 meters up. And in many of these jump, it's from just standing and up to the other side, so they can do that very well. So the vertical stripe, they not always look the same. So positions of how they actually looks like somebody has went through to the top with a jug of milk, sort of like pour from the hump all the way back to the tail, and sort of like that milk all of a sudden it drip down from the both sides. So they just have a beautiful vertical stripe, this animal. So remember, this is actually a greater kudu. There's another kudu which is called lesser kudu. Not 100% same in color, but kind of like grayish also. But they're very small, those one. And this is actually a very big species of kudu. And it's still cloud, as you can see on the horizon there, with all the trees. And it's going to be like this. They would go down to drink roughly when in a time they feel thirsty. But then twice perhaps per day. So you're commenting the stripes work so well. So indeed, it's such a beautiful day. So especially when you look at these stripe, like I just mentioned, looks like somebody has went through and right on top and sort of like pour milk from the hump section to the tail, sort of like milk all of a sudden then drip down. So they have such amazing and a stripe. But anyway, they're actually disappearing. So we're going to continue looking for anything we're going to find. We've got to give them a break and look for those we haven't found anyway. And then these are the other sort of giraffe. And then we haven't actually spent time with an impala this morning. So wherever they are, they just take it easy. But I love spending time with those sort of antelope because there's some details about them, but also not only that you also enjoy and look at them, but also how they attract many of prey, carnivore species, which is all the enemy for them. So I'm gonna carry on, check around.
The Masai Mara in Kenya is an iconic wilderness filled with life. Its inspirational beauty has captivated our hearts on WildEarth for many years. While this season of the world's greatest migration has been missed, WildEarth is preparing a spectacular comeback in 2022. For the first time ever, WildEarth will be running expeditions to Kenya's Masai Mara throughout the 2022 migration season. Hosted by David Githu and Isaac Rotich, you could be a part of the team that shares the wildebeest migration with the world, live on WildEarth's daily safaris. If you're interested, then head over to our website to find out more.
Our competitors are in the room behind me right now for the birding challenge, where they have to look at pictures and identify the birds and then separately listen to bird calls and identify them. But it's not easy. This is going to be the toughest one. Here we have the previous year's winners. You can see they're trying to see if they can remember all the answers, and look at them taking a sneak peek.
Welcome back on Bushwalk. We've just been looking at a number of different trees and their cultural uses and medicinal and practical applications which they have in the field. The one that you see right over here is known as a marula. Most of you would possibly know, be familiar with the marula and the famous amarula cream. There's also a myth with regards to this tree, that elephants actually get drunk on a fruit. However, that's not true. But you can make a very good beer out of this, and I've had it a few times, which does produce quite an intoxicating effect. If you're also not familiar with it, it can seriously upset your stomach. So generally we'll see that people in the area will start collecting buckets of these marula fruits and then eventually ferment them by putting sugar and a number of other ingredients together to make the marula beer. Over the years, it's also been used to making of liqueur, which is also very similar to mampur, where they will distill the fruit juice and then convert it into quite a potent alcohol, which sometimes have up to 80 to 90% alcohol levels in it. The fruit itself has also often been used for making jam. It makes a very, very nice jam. The seeds itself holds a very high amount of vitamin E, contents inside the nut, which is often used for skin that's chapping, but it's also used in modern cosmetics. You can also eat that little nut, and they're often sold on the street. You'll see that vendors in rural areas will sell those. There's also an interesting cultural story with regards to the seeds, because it's so hard to extract that seeds. But it's said that it's one of the highest tokens of friendship when you provide a person with a bag of these nuts that has been opened. However, the squirrel that lives over here tends to have no problem in opening those kernels to get to the nut, as if they've got razor-sharp teeth that's used for gnawing, and those teeth will rub over one another to keep them sharp, specifically for opening these little hard kernels. We also can use the roots of this tree in times of drought, or if you don't have sufficient amount of water, and it holds a large amount of water that you can then have eventually squeeze out of those roots. One of the other interesting cultural associations of this tree is how to deal with conflict in African culture. So should you and your wife have an argument and you're upsetting the neighbors within the community, they would actually take the couple and tie them to this tree, and they had before sunset to resolve their differences. I think sometimes it's actually the fear of being out there in the dark which actually resolved the conflict between the couple. It's also believed that if you can take the leaves of this tree and you can bathe in either a male tree or a female tree's leaves, that it can determine the sex of a baby. For the sun hunter-gatherers, this is also an important tree, as there's a beetle that often associates with this tree, and when it pupates, it drops down to the ground, close by to the roots, and it will drop normally some 50 centimeters underneath the ground. And that grub that's inside the pupa is often used for packing a toxin that's then put behind the tip of the arrow. We're going to move on and go and see if we can find something else to look at. Let's go and see what the others have on offer.
We're still on the trail of that leopard. We seem to have lost the tracks, but we are still in the general area, and as usual, the regular visitors surprises us yet again. There's just an incredible amount of elephants around at the moment, and that changes. One would every now and then go through about a 2 or 3 week period where there are hardly any. And I mean, these elephants have access to over 2 million hectares, if not more. And we are, in spite of the size of our traversing area, it's a very tiny fraction of this entire Greater Kruger region that we have access to. I mean, the Greater Kruger region is the size of small countries. And if you're from England, it's about the size of the entire Wales. If you're from the USA, it's roughly the size of the state Massachusetts. And in European terms, it's about half the size of the entire Switzerland. Just to give you an idea of the immense area that we are working with. Vast. At the moment there are multiple herds in our area. Very likely what we refer to as a supergroup, which is a loosely connected group of different individual herds that will enter an area. And obviously within the individual herds there's strong family ties, essentially composed out of a group of related females, mothers, daughters, aunts, cousins, nieces, grandmothers, granddaughters, and their young. Great, Laurie. Literally from the day they are born. The trunk is such an important piece of anatomy for an elephant that they virtually start moments after they find their feet after birth. The process of learning how to use it already starts. Now, a baby elephant initially don't have much need for the trunk in terms of food, because it will be nearly 100% dependent on milk. And they don't actually drink the milk with the trunk. It's a question that I receive quite a lot out on safari is do they also drink milk with the water the way they drink water? And the answer is no. They place the trunk on the forehead and then suckle with the mouth just like any other mammal. And then systematically, as they start eating solid food, the mother especially will often assist them and teach them how to use that trunk. Much like we learn how to walk and ride a bicycle and learn to write. So it's also progressive in that same manner. One of the cutest things that you can witness is a two-week-old elephant baby trying to use that trunk. You can see they are just so clumsy with it. It's almost as if, like, what is this thing hanging from my nose type of vibe. It was lovely to see them in the open for a change, before they head back to the woods.
Ingrid, what diseases do animals suffer from?
Good morning, Ingrid. Elephants there's no major disease that's a reason for concern for us. The one that we always keep an eye on is anthrax. It's a disease that often in dry periods surface here in this region, and they can succumb to it. It is it's fatal if they do contract it. And that is the only real concern for us. I'm sure that they do get colds and flu viruses very much like we do. It's very difficult to see in elephants if they're ill. It's probably more a case of condition issues when they get old. It's a condition we see often when the teeth are worn, their last set of teeth. gets worn and they cannot chew their food very often. That's one can clearly see their condition heading down, as well as an injury specifically to the trunk could very often prove to be quite a challenging thing to overcome. Diseases are quite important in a natural population of any organism. It's just one of the limiting factors, as we refer to in ecology. Now, every single organism would have limiting factors, and all these limiting factors, they come in the form of diseases: fire, food, predation, water, the elements, whatever, and they each have their own unique profile. And these are, I'm not going to say designed, but the purpose of that around it is to make sure that a particular species never reaches a number in a certain area or a quantity above the ecological carrying capacity of the area. And diseases are one of those components that ensures that something like that never happens. Obviously, once an area is disturbed, and us humans are often the culprit, and some of these, or the equilibrium gets disturbed, and then something like a disease or one of these limiting factors can actually get out of hand and have a negative effect on a population, or even a positive effect in terms of growth. Elephants have very few diseases and very few natural enemies. And if you remove one of those factors, like drought is often a very strong limiting factor for elephants, which helps limiting growth rate of a population and so forth. And therefore elephants everywhere in Africa where they are protected, the numbers seem to be rising quite rapidly year after year. Okay, what I would like to do is just move a little closer. Just want to investigate whether they're heading into a thicket or not. Again, we want to approach slowly, cautiously. I'm not worried that they're going to attack us or anything. It's just a matter of respect. If you approach them respectfully, slowly, almost as if your vehicle's body language shows that you not intend to harm them. And you have an elephant there, just do a little bit of a berth around it. And as you can see, the result is that we have a calm elephant. Doesn't always work out exactly like that. But that's always my goal, is to approach with respect and leave with respect.
So we got a ballast here in this drainage line system. It happens during our search. We just bump on them, but they're actually busy browsing. Some of them are grazing, so as we know with impalas, they can graze, they can browse. But where they are, it's actually pretty much in the Milwaukee River. We actually lower ourselves down to that drainage line system. During the search of the elephant tracks that we saw coming down here, there are 4 males and they're all just concentrating around here, listening around. They always stay active, these animals, all the time. That anything can happen. those hunt them, which is mainly leopard. And they're very sneaky. They can ambush pretty well, and then they're just going to wait for the possible time for them to already aim in a target. And these impalas will all know that.
If there's anybody who is interested.
So it looks like they're going to make their way out, maybe up to the hill a little bit. But I see how they're getting up there, checking out very carefully, because this is their own safety.
You're still with me watching this group of elephants, or a parade of elephants. Would be interesting to know if some of our viewers can come up with some more recognized collective nouns for elephants. Are just normally referred to as a herd, and I've heard that it's also called a parade of elephants. And send us your answer to Twitter, #WildEarth or @FC. If you're on YouTube, or just leave a comment on our live WildEarth website. Kids can also send us your answer to kids' questions at wildearth.tv via email. Question is, does anybody know of any other collective nouns for elephants other than a parade or a herd? Morning, Rita. The largest elephant herd I personally seen was 125 individuals. I will never forget that day. I don't know the exact date. It was a little bit further north from where we are now, in a reserve called the Timbavati, which is like the Sabi Sand, a privately owned portion of the Greater Kruger. And I recall we were in the south of the reserve, and we have these little open clearing areas, almost like a savanna, and I was sitting there counting 125 individuals. I'm sure there's been recordings of much larger groups, especially historically. We've read about herds numbering into a couple of hundred, but my personal largest that I've witnessed was that particular herd. And I could also remember that at the time there was one of the very well-known tuskers present as well, one of the very, very large tusked elephants in the Greater Kruger. I can't recall his name, but that was a magic sighting. That was really, it was still very early in my career, and it was phenomenal to be viewing this herd of elephant from a distance. And then at a later stage that day, I was virtually down there surrounded by the entire herd. Again, even at that early stage of my career, I employed the same ethics and principle that I do now, as to approach elephants with respect, and they will in all likeliness do the same, and it was just magical. Jacqueline, I love that. I, in fact, have to apologize. I have heard that one before as well. And yes, it is one that is also commonly used. I love that, since elephants really does have phenomenal memory capacity. Wow. My apologies. I have heard that one and I have used it in the past. Thank you very much. That is spot on. A parade of elephants or a memory of elephants. That is so descriptive. I prefer the memory one. That is just elephant. It is just exactly what they're about. It seems like they have moved into a thicket while we were watching this fork-tailed drongo. And we can still hear them, and so does the drongo. He can probably still see them, and he's trying to catch some flies and other insects that is associated with the presence of elephants. They often follow elephants. So we're going to slowly but surely extract from this particular sighting and leave them in absolute peace now. While I'm slowly but surely moving away, I just want to comment on another couple of answers we've received. Candace says it's an army of elephants. And you know what? Like I mentioned yesterday, there is no right and wrong here. And we can add that one to the list. I like that as well. An army of elephants, a parade of elephants, a memory of elephants. Fantastic. I just call it a herd of elephants. Everything out here is a herd, which is just a generic term I personally use. Doesn't mean it's exact protocol or perfect English or such. It's just a practical reason that I refer to everything as a herd. Hoofed animals and so forth, elephants, buffalo. They all have their recognized collective nouns. Well, we're going to continue to work this area in search of that female leopard whose tracks we saw earlier. And in the meantime, we'll switch to Andrew yet again.
So, we got a herd of, or parade of the elephant. So there's more than one here. So since we disguised the nouns collective of the elephants, herd of elephants, but parade of elephants. We got a parade. It's more than one here. Perhaps there is more because we've seen a lot of their tracks. I'm going to reposition myself. BK, is that right? So this is where these elephants have found themselves in, where I wasn't really sure. We spent time with the impala back there who is not even a sound of any sign that they're around here. But they're here, not far from this group of four impala that we've seen earlier. Perhaps that's because they've been very silent this time. They're not breaking quite a big trees around on the search for specific food they need, which is mainly grasses. So for now, it looks like, of course, we can see three, perhaps one in the middle there. Could be one of her baby, the cow that she's going to come out now. But their social structure bond on elephant is very strong, so they have very special bond where they take care of one another as long as they are related from the same breed or same group. That's what forms now the group. They gotta be relative and they're all related. Aunties, daughters, even these young males that are still in the group here, in that herd, they're still considered to be part of the group, as long as they're not yet in a stage where they may maybe sometimes turn very difficult to their sisters. This is when they are about maybe 15 years, 14 years back there, and then they're already far too big as this young male. It can be very difficult to even to their mother, because then they're far too big. Their attitude is a little bit different. And that's so peaceful. They are chilling out here, loving it so much, because we talk about the wind that is not picking up so much, but it's still cloudy and there's no misty. This is when we begin a drive. And then animals, they still practice their special needs, those they have to move about. Oliver, you're asking what are the most common cause of the death on the elephant? Mostly males, due to that fight during a competition of a dominees, of course, may kill one another with these tusks they got during a fight, the males. Due to an older age or sicknesses. So these are the three facts. They may actually sometimes get affected by those, but same to the females. Injury due to perhaps when they were pushing too much, but that's very rare on a female. They don't actually take it a serious fight. So that would be a disease also, and old age. We know for sure they were instinct almost. Perhaps they instinct, so due to the tusks, that could be one of those these days that it may sometimes threaten their lives. But of course, dying of age is something to do with they then go first starvations, and they go through starvation because of the tooth they got. They wound up, then of course won't allow animal anymore to use those teeth, and then of course it results in death in that animal of starving. Nothing will pass through esophagus or the throat without being chewed slightly more. Just gonna sit here, watch how she does. When you look at these tuskers of hers, in length there is a difference, not equally. One is too much longer, other one is shorter, especially the one towards us. So it looks like then she's left-handed. Comment from Olivia. So time to spend with the elephant has been always great. So let's just take a moment listening to all of her disturb and doing their feeding. So everybody, we're gonna sit still here looking at these elephants. Hopefully a lot of them came towards this one.
For me, the best part about being a guide is being able to live out in Africa's wild places and being able to share that with people. Of all
the challenges, for me, the one that I'm probably the most comfortable with is the game drive. I think that's what I do most days, so that would probably be what I feel like I'd do the best at. Almost like someone's put little Lego blocks up there and made this perfect little sort of statue, and there's another one further along as we drive. One of the challenges I'm the most nervous about would probably be shooting. I think on the day there's always quite a bit of pressure and intimidation, always associated with it, but I guess we'll see how it goes. I hope I'll win this competition, but if I don't, it's still been an experience of a lifetime, and I've learned a lot and met a lot of really, really cool people.
I've seen something I've never seen here before. Look at these cubs. One is crossing the river. It's being washed away, unfortunately, but I'm sure the mother is going to save her. Look at that. How beautiful. Look at that. One crossing, two to go.
So we are still sitting here. What we've seen here, it's one of the young ones that came into the area. What this young one doing now, so the mother is providing more of these breaking very rough trees and very strong branches. And for the young one would go for the remain, perhaps also share with what the mother can have at the same time. They've actually been pretty quiet elephants that I've ever seen. Usually we drove down there in a drainage line system where when we were listening we could hear nothing then. Not a sound of breaking trees or branches. But that can happen depending on what that time they're looking for. And they can vary on the debarking trees. For that, they spend maybe an hour debark their trees and then select all this combium layer feeding on them. Tori, so you're asking how long can a trunk get? So I can get up to about 4, usually 4 meter, 3 meter, 4 meter. The trunk itself can be extended due to that. You see the folders when they want, they can stretch it out. Sometimes they can actually bring it up too much closer. For the huge elephant can be vary from there. So we're looking at the female here, roughly about 3 meter long. And that trunk can weigh 100 kg, depending on how big also elephant is. So some elephants, females are so small in general compared to the male. And this young one still remaining there. This is where the mother was. So got a little bit of access to those branches which is already break off by the mother. may spend a little bit of a time there feeding on that, but also keeping an eye with the parents, but also keeping an eye on that, because they don't have to be left behind far from their parents due to all of the emergency can happen. You've got lions can really go for it immediately, which is rare for the lion to hunt elephant, but if it happens, it happens, and it can happen for sure. Judy asking how the hearing stronger compared to human. I'm not sure what is the difference there between us, but then they also still can hear 100%. Elephants, they can hear info sound pretty much well. And then for that, this is when it's very dead, quiet, with no wind much. They can hear very well. Maybe same as we do, because we can also hear the airborne. Seems to be also the same, that the hearing for them can be slightly that way. So I'm going to reverse a little bit. So I'm just trying to reposition here. Hopefully they come towards us, these elephants. In the meantime, let's go across to JP, who they're at the watering hole.
Good morning and welcome back on Bushwalk. We're just busy viewing our Egyptian geese at Leopard Dam. Just did a quick count and all 8 of them is around. And they're still being followed by the little grebe that's been seen with them over the last few days. Out of original 9, we see that there's still, as mentioned earlier, 8 of them, which is quite successful, as they tend to generally quickly lose a large number of chicks before that they can even reach adulthood. Quite often we find that baboons, as well as a number of other predators, will go for them. I've also seen mongoose going for them. And in marinas in the Western Cape area where I used to live, I often used to find that squid would actually take the chicks out of the water and drown them and then consume them. In general, the adults are also very protective towards these little guys. And if there's any sign of a predator that comes, they'll very quickly alert them, and you'll normally see that the chicks will quickly go into the water where they're safe from land-based predators. I've also seen certain birds of prey picking off chicks off the surface of water in the past. In some cases, we'll also notice that the adults will actually use a distraction display very similar to that of the lapwing species, where they will move towards a predator, flying at them, and quite often with the legs out dangling to distract them away from the chicks, as the adults know that they've got a better chance to stand attack against a predator compared to the young. We're just going to sit over here for a little bit longer and see what they get up to. Good morning, Megan, and welcome to the show. And we were just commenting about that a few minutes ago between myself and the cameraman, how quickly they are actually growing. And it's almost like if they're slightly larger every time that we get here. One of the benefits that the parents have in terms of these chicks is that they can take care of themselves, so they don't have to feed them. We refer to these type of young as precocial, unlike that of birds such as passerines, which has got a little tricial young, which is dependent on the adults to feed them and take care of them. These little guys were also born with dawn to protect them and insulate them against the elements, unlike that of passerine chicks, which is naked when born, when hatched. Well, then meanwhile, let's go and see what Chris is up to.
We found our own pair of geese. Up here at Tamboti Dam. Now, Tamboti is the name of a particular tree that's found here close by, well, all over the area. And the reason we stopped here, a little thicket in the distance, there's a squirrel, a tree squirrel that was doing some alarm calls. And that could be a snake, it could be a mongoose, it could be a leopard, it could be anything. So we decided to just investigate if there is anything that we should look at. And at the moment it's only the geese, and every now and then we just see this ripple in the water where fish just comes up to catch a bit of air. It's very likely to be catfish, or we could just call them barbel or sharp-toothed catfish. This pond is drying up rapidly and the oxygen levels would be rather low, but catfish can withstand very, very low oxygen levels. They can even dig themselves into the mud and survive until the next rains come. Just waiting to see some of these ripples. And sometimes even see the mouth of the catfish if you're quick enough. Ironically, they are not geese, even though their name suggests so. They're a type of perching duck. Imagine a duck sitting in a tree. It's not something you see every day, but yes, this is a duck that does perch, sometimes found in trees, especially old trees with no foliage. Very close relative of the African shell duck, which I don't really see much in this area, but looks somewhat similar. So you can, it's basically a type of perching shell duck if you want to really be technical. So it's not a true goose, it's a duck. And now there's very little dimorphism between male and female in terms of appearance. One listens to them, the males just have this hissing sort of sound it makes, and the female makes the more typical duck-like, a typical quack, duck-like sound. So the female are more vocal in this species than the male. And it's usually the other way around with birds. So observing them in that way, it suggests, according to its sounds, that the one on the right would be the male and the one in front on the left, the female. And the male there doing his little display. Also a pair of lapwings. Very peaceful. Indeed, Harry, it's a very, very peaceful scene.
Station, how many Djuma vehicle inside the vessel?
So this lapwing is named or called the blacksmith lapwing. Used to be called a blacksmith plover, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And they've got this little call that they make, like a ting, ting, ting type of sound, and it literally sounds like a blacksmith busy working some metal on the anvil. It literally sounds like that. Just a lot softer, but very pretty bird. Scouting the water's edge there for small crustaceans, insects. At times even tadpoles. They're quite resourceful. That's it. They don't have one specific thing that they consume. It appears that the squirrel alarm calls have now stopped, so it might have been something small. I suspect a mongoose or something like that, and whatever it was, the squirrels obviously now are happy that whatever threat it was has disappeared. And now the hammerkop have arrived. Lovely, peaceful scene. We will be continuing again. That was just easy.
Every year in August, South Africa marks Women's Month. WildEarth would like to acknowledge and thank all the amazing females who have worked tirelessly to share our nature with the world.
We're gonna have to just wait, okay? She's gonna come out there just on my right-hand side, and she can see these impala.
Now you've got to inhale it. It burns. I don't know if it's supposed to work instantly. Go, girl, go. Get her. Get her, girl. Get her. I'm so looking forward to following her story in the future.
I'm really hoping there's two. I'm really hoping there's two. But you know, even if there's one, oh my goodness, everyone.
And I get to share it with you. Isn't that extra special? I get to experience it and show it to everyone.
Guiding as an industry has become, over time, more and more professional and more recognized as a profession rather than just a hobby. And so to be recognized for that professionality is really kind of it's humbling, really, to be able to say that. It's definitely birding is the thing that I feel most comfortable with in terms of categories that we have here. At least comfortable. I mean, you never know how you're going to shoot on a particular day. You can have a good day where you blast everything as you need to, in terms of the targets, and then you can have a shocker where you just, miss a single shot here or there, and that's basically the end of your day. To be considered for such an experience is really a powerful thing, and so I'm here just to have a lot of fun and experience what the competition's all about.
You are cheeky. That was a brave decision. Amber Eyes is... Oh. That is so magic. That was absolutely wonderful. Amber Eyes just gave that cub an enormous hug.
Expect the unexpected here on WildEarth daily.
So we're still sitting here looking at these beautiful parade of elephants, and they are busy taking it easy, doing their own thing, feeding, eating grasses. Many of the females already seen 2 big females here, but is that there is more of them that we can hear from the way distance. This is when they communicate through sound, and can hear some of a response coming from the other side. So it could happen that it's actually maybe a larger group here. They can spread all over. When they are feeding, they don't have to be always close together that way. Only those with these little babies, they have to, because of the safety of their babies. And I will take it easy this way, and then of course maybe later on, because we're just south of Gari Dam, and they're slowly making their way facing northwards, and then it happens they may find themselves into that dam they drink. Lara, you're asking how many hours do elephants feed per day? So they need a lot of hours, the whole day hours feed. And then in that whole day hours, you find in 24 hours, they only, 26 hours in fact, then you find they only slept 1 hour. And the rest of these hours, then they're going to have to be standing up and eat. This also, but then of course throughout the night. So out of the 26 hours, only 1 hour sleep, perhaps maybe half an hour sleep. And that sleep is not actually proper sleep, because many of the time they can just stand still maybe they can go down as well. So many of these mounds, they can go down and lie down when they want to, when they're comfortable on that. But due to their body size, they need a lot of food. Benelulu, you commenting, this is so impressive. It is impressive looking at these elephants on their own environment. That is excellent. Precious. So I got that. So it's so good that you're able to see them on their own environment and still specialize, and that they don't actually feel any disturbance. Some of them on the far left, there's the one that we couldn't see earlier on. Perhaps one of the young male that are grown up in this group. So the trunk itself can do so much, and then it's only a tool on this animal. They need them for sure, for a drinking water, or to suck water, pour in the mouth. But also it's always work better when I can see on this young male, he has a beautiful two sets of tusks that are grown up very well in length. Looks like he's going to be one of the beautiful male around here. Especially when he's 20, it's going to be one of these magnificent tusks. In this drainage line here, it's so many of these green already because it's so much cooler in this riverine here. Trees are all, that's why the elephants will love it so much, spending time in this area like that. And so everybody, we almost coming in the end of the show of this morning. So we all want to thank you so much for being part of the show. And of course, it's been really a privilege having you all on board. But again, we'll be doing the same this afternoon, same time. We'll be taking you out to see what we're going to see. And then for now, that's goodbye from us.